You were 14 years old. Elvis was 24, right?
Mm-hmm.
How did your parents allow a 14-year-old teenager baby to be with this then superstar of...
It was not easy on my parents. You know, first of all, it was just an innocent meeting. And of course, you know, I was excited and I was reluctant because I didn't think they'd ever let me go. But it was just a one-time opportunity. That's all they thought it would be. I never expected him to ask me back. They never expected him to ask me back.
But Elvis did ask you back, and you saw him again and again. And you would get home very late at night and be exhausted the next day when you had to go to school. And your parents let you go again and again.
You know, when you're in love, it's hard to fight. And I was rebellious somewhat, meaning I didn't want to go to school, or I said I wouldn't go to school. Please let me, you know, he'd be out of my life after 6 months, and, you know, don't ruin my life because I really cared. And he came to the house and he was charming, he was wonderful, and my family had a lot of faith in him.
What was Elvis Presley like then?
He was insecure. He was, you could talk to him as a person. You knew who he was, you knew his fears. He had, he was so vulnerable. He was gentle, he was fun. He was just, he was a person you could really deal with.
Were you mad about him?
I was, but our relationship was, it's very different. It was a very protective relationship from the very beginning. I don't know what it was about him, but he kind of took me under his arm and nourished me in many ways.
You write in your book, you're 14, Elvis would take me into his bedroom, and then we would kiss long, deep, passionate kisses, and his caresses would leave me weak with desire.
Yes, it's true.
Yet he never tried to go further than kissing you.
No. No, he didn't. There was an agreement, I guess, he made with himself that the woman that he decided to take for his wife, he was going to keep her that way until he married her.
Keep her a virgin no matter what.
Right.
Even then, in Germany, when you had trouble getting up for classes, Elvis gave you Dexedrine. First time you'd seen pills.
I didn't know what was going on as far as, you know, pills or what they were, sleeping pills. I mean, he gave them to me to be helpful, to say, look, if it's really getting really bad and you're not doing well, you know, take a couple of these. But he was very cautious about them, and he said, don't take them a lot, and just take them if you really need them.
What do you think attracted a 24-year-old star to a 14-year-old inexperienced? Or am I telling you just as I say that? Is that what attracted him to you?
The inexperience, yes. I think Elvis had been around Hollywood already. He had already seen Hollywood, quote-unquote, starlets. So I think in his own mind, he thought, well, I'll just be with someone and teach her as it comes. And I don't think a lot of older women would have put up with a lot of the things that went on. I mean, you know, because when you're young, you kind of... I listened to him and did what he said. What woman around his age, let's say 24 or 25, would want to go out with a lot of guys when they went out?
He was almost always with an entourage.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Elvis went back to America, was released from the service. You stayed in Germany. When you were 15, he says, come live with me in Memphis. And your parents said, okay.
In my parents' defense, they were going through it. They were having a hard time with this, but I was in love. And they were caught between, well, if we don't let her go, you know, she'll sneak off and do it, or she'll catch a plane and go. My mother would cry and go, I don't know what to do. You know, and I feel badly because they did go through a lot.
Looking back, do you think your parents should have let you go to Memphis?
Yes.
Why?
Why? Because, who knows? I maybe wouldn't have been married and had the child I have. I don't think they made a mistake.
Did Elvis mention marriage when you first moved to Memphis?
He was reluctant in mentioning marriage. Very little.
When Elvis wanted entertainment, he would rent a whole movie theater or rent a playground or fly across the country for a peanut butter sandwich. was this like for you as a kid?
It was a slow involvement. He didn't do it all at once.
Mm-hmm.
You know, things just started happening, and then it was a part of my life. If you want something, you get a plane to go get it. If you want to do something, you make arrangements and you call across the country, and it just happens. I didn't do it myself, but you had people taking care of everything for you. I did nothing. Everything was taken care of.
And during the day, you got up and went to high school. Came home in the afternoon. You said sometimes you'd crawl into bed with Elvis at 3 or 4 in the afternoon, and he was just getting up and didn't even know you were gone.
Mm-hmm. I worked that out.
And then you stayed up most of the night?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And took pills to go to sleep?
I had to. Because we got home so early in the morning, he would sleep until 3 or 4 in the afternoon, and then he'd get his sleep. So I'd be lucky if I got another half hour in. And I had to make it work. I had to do it. I mean, with a fear of a young girl fearing that if I didn't do it, maybe someone would take my place. I always had that fear, well, if I don't do this, someone's going to do it, and I wanted to be the one.
At one point, you said, in the early stages of your living there, that he gave you 2 pills. Placidil, was it called?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And you almost died. And
well,
he didn't call a doctor.
Well, he forgot, I think, the fact that I had never taken pills, and he had given me 2, because he was used to taking 2. It didn't, it didn't bother him. And he gave them to me, and I was knocked out for about 2 days.
So this is this bizarre life of being able to have or buy anything you want, loneliness, days of being alone with him in darkened rooms, pills, and you loved him.
Mm-hmm.
Was he good to you?
Very.
Was he also bad to you?
When you say bad to me, I don't think it wasn't bad to me in a way that, intentional bad. Elvis went through an awful lot, and I think the communication that we had was very difficult and different. Elvis's way of dealing with problems were not confronting the problems, and if there was a problem, he would buy, or to make it all right and go right for you, make it better, he'd buy you a gift.
You wrote, Elvis controlled your looks, your clothes, your hair, your makeup. He controlled you totally. Is that accurate?
Mm-hmm. I was definitely under a spell of what I thought was love. And I had to take responsibility for that, too.
But you were 16, 17 years old.
But what did I know? I knew nothing else. I had nothing else. I had no experience, not even in life, but with other people.
And even though he wanted you virginal and pure, he dressed you sequins, shiny material, low cut, slit up the side. Why?
I think maybe it was his way of showing sophistication. Maybe making me appear older. I don't know. There's some kind of an appeal that men like with a trashy kind of look. Maybe he liked that.
That's what turned him on.
Mm-hmm.
6 years you lived there before he decided to marry you.
Mm-hmm.
In those 6 years of sleeping with him every night, he never had intercourse with you. You wrote in your book that there were times when you begged him. I even wrote it down. You said, I'm a woman who needs to make love and to feel desired by her man. Please don't make me beg. 6 years of that? Priscilla, why?
Well, again, I can only go back to what his concept was as what he wanted in a woman. And somewhere he, along in his past, he said that he wanted a virgin.
Yet, you also write that you and Elvis took dozens and dozens of Polaroid pictures acting out your fantasies. All different kinds of fantasies. You learned to turn him on sexually even though you never had intercourse. You did say, though, under no circumstances were his ideas or playfulness ever perverted.
No.
Do you feel the same way today now that you're older and you look back?
No, I can't say it's a perversion. I really can't say that. I mean, nothing was harmful. Nothing was done in bad intent. Nothing was done, that I don't think is unusual.
And then you'd have these wonderful, passionate, frustrating weeks, and then he'd go away.
Mm-hmm. And then he'd go away.
Finally, after 6 years, he asked you to marry him. How come? What happened?
I think the pressure was on somewhat, too. We've been together for 6 years. The relationship is going well. The suggestion, I think, came from Colonel Parker. Either, you know, maybe you should either get married or go on. If you're not going to get married, then what are you doing?
You said that you realized that your relationship with Elvis depended very much on how his career was going.
That's true. He would just have low points, and when he had low points, there was nothing that could get him out of it. And I feel that's another reason why Elvis felt the help that he had, you know, with some of the pills would get him out of that. I mean, he went through a lot. He went through an awful lot. He was, a lot was expected of him. A lot of demands were put on him. He didn't know how to deal with it any other way. He really didn't. And he wasn't doing it, he really thought he had it under control.
How did you get yourself to stop taking all the pills?
Because I didn't like the feeling of not being in control. It scared me. Because I was doing things that I wouldn't normally do. Things became exaggerated. Things were much bigger. Problems became much more of a problem. I just didn't like what was happening to me. Plus, the two of us taking it, we were like, you know, two different people with each other. And it was, one of us had to be in control.
And you knew that even then?
I knew that then, yes.
What about his temper? We hear a lot about that temper.
Yes, he did have a temper. He did. It was unpredictable. It's funny now when you think about it, because his temper was always, I think, bursts of either it's frustration, but I think because he had the power and the money to destroy, he could just replace it like that.
I mean, if Elvis didn't like a performer on television, he would go bang, bang, and shoot the television set. Then it would be all gone.
Yes. He'd just blow them off the air. That's simple. And the television would be placed like that.
Before you turned around, there'd be a new set. But he carried guns all the time.
Yes, he did. He had a love of guns, and he had a collection of guns, and I guess it's another way of feeling that power.
Sometimes when he was irrational, he did hurt you. He once gave you a black eye. He once threw a chair at you. You didn't like something he sang.
No.
And he threw a chair at you.
And it had records on it, and the records went all over the place.
Priscilla, will you tell me what was so wonderful about him?
The real him, the real Elvis, was generous, wonderful, sensitive, considerate.
Finally comes that happy day when you get married in 1967. And then 9 months later, your baby was born.
Yes.
You think the baby was conceived in your wedding?
I would say so.
And here you have this beautiful baby. And now you find, as you write, now you find that your husband doesn't want to go to bed with you.
Yes. Elvis had a hard time dealing with mother and the little girl that I was to him. And that's, I didn't know it then, but that's how I found out and realized in later years. But he was a father to me. He was my mentor. To show any kind of vulnerability or insecurity to me was not macho. Was not something that he felt I should see. So our communication was horrible. It was terrible. I mean, today, I would probably be able to communicate with him much more. I would, know how to deal with it. I didn't know how to deal with it then.
Yeah.
You can just be so much to someone. I mean, I was everything to him. I loved him. I love him today. I couldn't help it. I mean, he was a wonderful person. But there's times that you have to think of yourself. And I didn't want to go along with the program anymore. And we all have to take responsibility for ourselves. And that's when it hit me. I had to take responsibility for my own self. I couldn't be a life support.
And one day you went in and said, I'm leaving. There was another man in your life then. He was your karate teacher,
right.
Mike Stone. And you went off then and lived with him.
Yeah.
It was said that Elvis tried to kill him or wanted him killed.
Right.
Do you believe that?
I think at that time, yes, he did. He wanted that to happen.
Did he do anything about it?
No. A lot of it was talk, anger, talking out of emotion.
And both of you changed. How did you change?
I wasn't living in the real world. I was living in a bubble. And I found that I had my own taste. I had things that I liked that weren't Elvis's. I found Priscilla.
Now you're an actress, a successful actress. Is it wonderful to be known when people see you as Jenna Wade and not as Elvis Presley's wife?
It's different.
Yeah.
There were times I did not even feel like a person. I mean, Elvis was always the concerned person. He was first and foremost. No one cared about you. No one cared about your feelings, what you're going through, your sensitivities. That was never there. And then now I feel like I'm a person, and I feel like I'm accepted somewhat.
And Elvis changed. I mean, I remember those pictures of Elvis in those last years, that fat, bloated man. What did you think happened to him?
We talked a lot after we had broken up. In fact, we had become very close. And again, the insecurity set in, age set in. He had a horrible fear of approaching 40. It was coming very rapidly. He wasn't satisfied, wasn't happy with where his career was. And it was difficult to be around, to see it.
One of the major questions that has been asked, did he die from drugs?
It probably took its toll. I think that matched with his weight, stress. The last few years, he didn't take care of himself. And despite what has been said, people did try to get him to take care of himself and to go into the hospital, but he honestly thought he had it under control. He did not think, he was that bad.
The fact that even with all of the things about him that are very disturbing when you read about it today, and as I talk to you, we brought out a lot of information that's painful. Mm-hmm. And yet you still do love him. You still do think well of him.
I do. I never not loved him. For me to leave was the biggest decision in my life. Nobody's perfect. He was a human being. That's the aspect I'm trying to show. That's all. That was the intent of the whole book, is to show a love story. A man, a human, not the performer, not the image, not the idol.
Do you still love him?
Absolutely.
How would you want Elvis to be remembered?
I think the early years, I look at that and I think that's Elvis. He was having fun. You can see it in his films. He was a very humble man, a great sense of humor. And his biggest joy was being on stage.